How's everybody doing? Can you still do one more talk? I'm not so sure. Really? Really? Are you melting? Is it hot? No, of course not. All right. So I'm Jay. I'm based out of Berlin, Germany. And on my day job, as introduced, I work on the Adobe XD team. And besides that day job, I'm moving two non-for-profits forward. And one is opendevicelab.com, which helps to spawn and to locate places where designers and developers can test their work across a variety of devices. And the other one is the Berlin chapter of the Interaction Design Association, where we are fostering knowledge exchange across a community of experts and novices. Speaking about community, one thing I just recently launched is the XDI team, which is a team of active freelance designers that are now extending the XD team in community outreach and also in giving back to communities by speaking at conferences, teaching workshops, and by running premium training for customers. In my free time, I enjoy building furniture for our house and our garden. 2 years ago, our third kid was born. And while juggling the stuff around the house to make room for baby boy, my partner had the idea to make a bunk bed for our two elder daughters. We sat down to define the functionality that piece of furniture should cover, which turned out to be two guardrail beds for the girls, including a ladder, a guest bed, a bookcase, a pull-out table for our puzzle queens. Because why did that idiot ask for their wishes in the first place? So we took a look at available out-of-the-box solutions, which really didn't meet our requirements at all. We took a look at what others built in terms of custom kids' beds, which helped in terms of inspiration and to do the necessary user research with our daughters. And it also helped to clearly identify what we're not going to do. Take a look at this design. It says, here's a design for kids, a bunk bed based on the Velociraptor cage from the first Jurassic Park film. The box shape and leather make for a perfect bunk bed for kids. I'm not that convinced, Dave, but anyhow. Working in high tech is great, but all those digital things I do, well, that's all pretty virtual stuff. My work does not bring up things that I could touch with my hands or make my small kids understand, like, hey, look, this is something like that has been made. So that's among the reasons why I love to find time and balance in working with wood. Ideate, plan, go out to the wood shop and select raw materials. Turn a selection of 1.5 tons of this, into something like this, just to end up with something as simple, solid, and durable like this. So before attempting to create the bunk bed, I had built less complex pieces of furniture before, like this one. And here's another example that's been made out of the same pile of raw wood. And it went from here to there to that unique and tailor-made solution for our master bathroom. It's a bit like the IKEA effect, if you're familiar with that, but then it is pretty different from the IKEA effect. So before you can build something like that, you need a design. And you need detailed specifications. And in the past, I used to sketch my plans with pen and paper. And more complicated parts of a project needed several detailed drawings. And that's where I typically took my pen and paper work to OmniGraffle to draw the project from multiple angles. Anyhow, before you can begin to format the board or even go and buy materials, you have to create a part list, which I did in Excel. But all those documents were never connected to each other. And while designing the project, whenever I realized that a more fundamental change was needed, I had to examine everything, and too often to draw all those plans again. While I fleshed out the raw idea for that bunk bed using pen and paper, it dawned at me that my old patchwork of tools would not cut it for this thing. Also, this bunk bed, drawer, bookcase, guest bed, puzzle table, ladder thing was far too complex to be based off of a multitude of 2D plans. But I had become so familiar with my old and cumbersome workflow. And yes, I did try to switch to CAD, to 3D design tools before, but I really never figured out how that worked. Up until that day, when I found a YouTube video of a carpenter explaining SketchUp through the eyes and hands of a carpenter. And with that narrative, I immediately understood how to use that tool for my woodworking needs and began designing the bunk bed in 3D. It took me only a week, and I had managed to design everything in one tool, in one file, without the added friction and error potential of a multitude of disconnected documents. And I was able to prototype and to show the intended outcome, to validate my ideas with my partner in that one tool. And then I could even take my 3D design to the workshop to pull out the specs and to transform it into the 197 unique parts I needed to build the bunk bed. Did you ever get to read that hilarious article by Keaton Herzer? Anybody? Are you still alive? Nobody read the article? Not even one person in this room of, yes, 1 out of 2,000 people. Perfect. So you know it already. So Keaton summarizes the ideal design workflow for us. And in Keaton's article, your workflow begins with pen and paper. You'd then take pictures of your sketches and make them clickable using Pop. But hey, wireframes are needed, so OmniGraffle. But dang, a drop-down menu is required. So where are you, Balsamiq? Let's rebuild all those wireframes with you. You realize you dislike Balsamiq, so you reattempt the same task using Xure. You realize you also dislike Xure, so why not jump to Illustrator and a wireframing kit for $89? You export your wireframes as a PNG and share them using InVision with your team. Just to wake up the next morning and to cry into your breakfast bowl because of all the mean comments that your team has left to your prototype. At some point, the wireframes are signed off, so off to Sketch to work on the visual design. Now export these as a PNG and import them into Flinto. But your stakeholder doesn't want to install the Flinto app, so off to Principal to make those screens interactive. Well, I think that's step 17 or 18 out of 28 or something like that. And Keaton goes on with that for another while. And while this article is fun, and it will probably make you laugh, the ugly reality, ladies and gentlemen, that this really is all about is that rather inefficient, cumbersome, error-prone workflow involving a patchwork of software tools that are creating a multitude of disconnected files, which are probably all named something like You're laughing because you know that this is right, huh? So what could we do to change that? Well, at Adobe, I don't know if you can see it, but this is Stone Age in the back. At Adobe, we have many great tools, and some of that are around since way more than a quarter of a century. Tools that can and are being used for things they have never been designed for in the first place. Because what is Photoshop? It's a bitmap editor, and its main persona is a person editing images. Still, it has been used for UI design for two decades. Anyhow, at Adobe, about 3-4 years ago, a small team came together to design a design tool for designers. It still baffles me, but XD is the first Adobe design tool that is being designed for designers. So we looked at our favorite pieces of flagship apps and decided to start from scratch. We wanted to completely reimagine a design tool from today's perspective, build something modern and future-proof. What we built from ground up is now called Adobe XD. And with XD, we aim to enable you to design at the speed of thought. Good defaults encourage good design. So on day 0, a number of principles have been defined for XD that are core to the product and really drive our decision-making. First, XD is lightweight and approachable, but powerful and not limiting. Second, zero friction. Performance and UI should feel invisible to the user. XD is direct and real-time, accurate and instant. We're not beholden to any traditional Adobe UI. We took what's appropriate and we did the rest. And third, XD is transparent and open. The community, you, are involved, and we are open and responsive to feedback. Update our users on feature and bug progress, and our roadmap is publicly available. XD is fast and fluid while we are navigating around this set of artboards. Drawing is simple, precise, and vector-based, but pixel-accurate. Changing the design, as in this repeat grid, or adjusting those stars, which is just another repeat grid. Let's add my smartphone to the view here, where any edits made on the design are reflected in real time on the actual device. Let me get to prototyping mode here and wire up the home to the list to the detail screen, and you can see that we can instantly test our work on the actual device. XD allows you to do all the work, from wireframing over to lo-fi design, over to hi-fi design, right into prototyping, and up to sharing your work with your stakeholders to get their feedback, all the way down to developer handoff. We're currently completing the work on the design specs feature, which allows you to share a link with somebody simply by using a browser to access the specs of your design, which is including the user flow, measurements, distances, color, character styles, copy, interactions, and upcoming asset extraction and code snippets. And at it, we recently started to open XD for interoperability with third-party apps. That means you can totally use Zeppelin, Arvo Code, or simply together with XD if you prefer that over the built-in design specs feature. Or just open Sketch or Photoshop files with XD. Fast Company has had a lot positive things to say about XD. And my favorite quote from Fast Company is about the completely new product design process we are employing. And new means new for Adobe. And it's also about the thousands of independent designers who are looped into that process in providing feedback to our pre-release programs and to the regular releases. And Fast Company called that process a uniquely nimble and transparent approach from an industry behemoth. I think they nailed it, I mean, with a behemoth. But the core of my talk today is to share some specifics on that approach with you and explain where it has so fundamentally changed the way product is being designed and developed at Adobe. XD went through a couple of stages. First, we released a beta by the name Project Comet, which got renamed to Adobe Experience Design, which is a long name, and it was added like public preview, then public beta, and with the public and official 1.0 release in last October, we ditched the long name and we just call it XD going forward. Because simplify all the things. I mean, at least when your corporate branding team allows you to do that. They did. XD used to be available as a so-called beta version over 19 months. And we all would probably associate the word beta with not there yet, right? Beta is like not ready. So let me explain to you why this assumption did not match the beta of XD and how we managed to redefine beta, to be able to show our vision to the public, to be able to learn and to iterate. We all know this kind of beta software that has a lot of features, but it lacks in terms of deep implementation, stability, quality, performance, or all of that, right? So why is that? In software development, we have 3 key parameters coming into play. And do not ask me why it's always 3, but it is. Quality, time, as in time to release, and scope, which means feature set. So on the XD team, we're using this own version of the magic triangle of project management, not our invention again. We just call it the iron triangle because you can't really work around it. And the logic is, it is impossible to constrain more than 2 of the 3 parameters. Constrain scope and time, and quality suffers. Constrain quality and scope, and you won't make the release date. Very often, the wish for the largest possible feature set built with limited time and resources would result in bad quality and bad user experience. And this is what a typical beta release is all about. The first beta has all the features, but it does not have a deep feature implementation because it requires time to flesh out the very details. And then subsequent updates are being released, aiming to add the missing details and to catch up in terms of quality. This catch-up fails very often due to one specific reason. There is no solid foundation, no solid and well-engineered technical foundation, because how do you know what to prepare for when you did not take the time to think through the things to its very end? And no solid and well-designed user experience, because same reasons. So, as opposed to churning out a fully fledged storefront, which would base on our own assumptions, we made the decision to start our beta releases with a minimal feature set that shows depth and is well thought through to all those relevant details that we wanted to validate, that shows a solid design and implementation, and that matches the quality standards that we set for XD. And then, when we've heard back, and then when we can measure ourselves, and when we can build on top of learnings, then we would go ahead and add functionality and detail, prioritizing by what is important to our users, one solid step at a time. With that beta 1 in March 2016, we have delivered our vision of a product, but at the performance and user experience of a full release, just with less features. And since that first release, 19 months passed leading up to 1.0 in October last year, where we have and are iterating pretty quickly by releasing an updated quality release every single month with added features and added context. What we believe is that this approach has allowed our users, you, to influence and to shape the product while actually having a great experience. And we believe our decision to not trust our own assumptions, to leave out even the most obvious functionality, and to define those details first, together, is really key in building an awesome product. We did release 18 beta versions of XD for macOS, 8 for Windows 10, 6 generations for iOS and Android to those stores that know no beta, before we even moved to 1.0. And we are continuing the same model by releasing quality updates every single month and by adding the functionality that our users are requiring to do us next. That means, yes, we did not even start on even some of the most obvious functionality. And you will miss some functionality while we are busy adding that in. But hey, that's what you miss with every other of your current tools as well. Patchworking things together and working around by stapling multiple solutions into one. So I told you how we redefined beta. But how do we manage to decide what to actually implement for beta 1? And Saskia Widdeler, a Dutch designer, had that bit in her awesome talk at Web Expo in Prague last autumn. And I'm stealing that to remind you what actually happens when you assume. You're making an ass out of you and me. So what could we done to identify the true needs of our users better and more precise and on a continuous basis? How could we ensure not to base our decisions on individual opinions? Well, we started off with the same method that we're now using on an ongoing basis, which is user-centered design, starting off with serious user research. This is where we empathize, define, make something, show it, learn, and keep on improving. User research at Adobe is handled by professional full-time researchers embedded across our design and product management teams. So there are people that actually know what they're doing, not like me. And they do that on a profound and mature basis. And I am constantly learning of them. The other component of our research is being conducted by many roles across the full team. This goes into engineering management or computer scientists or quality engineers or even marketing and legal. In my case, that's through the product management team. Let me call that extended user research. And this is also where we are more on the guerrilla side of methodology. So our research happens in form of workshops at customers or at community meetings. Typically, we do focus groups in a ratio of 1 interviewer to a maximum of 12 attendees of around 2 hours. And normally, I would start with an introduction round where attendees explain their current workflows and challenges. Typically, this organically leads into very interesting discussions among attendees without me having asked a single question. It's a bit like an unmoderated interview. And it almost leads into recording individual ideas and requests and discussing the relevance and the vision for them with the group. It's quite fun to endlessly ask open-ended questions. see how people are actually reacting to each other's ideas. And based on our current research and the most pressing questions, I typically have a set of things I want attendees to reflect on. So there's a moderated interview component as well. The challenge is to actually make people think out of the box. So if you just ask a designer, how does your favorite design tool look like? The things you will hear back are all based on learned behavior, things they like from tools that they know. But we want to go much deeper than that. To illustrate what we are talking about, I would show a prototype or a quick demo or only a concept. And quite stunning to ourselves, we found that actual printouts work best for like A/B type of testing. People can just tap on the one they like or mark it with a cross, can collect the paper and move that to a digital sort of record later on. One thing we nearly almost always use to help us prioritize what to do next is the $100 test. I like to do that on printed paper as well. Again, since you can just collect the paper after that. And on that paper is an unordered list of features or improvements to XD, and participants are being asked to spend virtual dollar notes on those features, the ones that are most important to them. So they have to spend distinct and totally weird dollar notes, so perhaps $40 on one thing, $25 on another, 20, 10, and 5 each on other features. And as a result, we get a prioritized list of the 5 most pressing issues. And when interviewing a customer or a team of people that is working together, we also ask them to agree together as a team on their spendings of the $100. And this really holds for much more interesting insights and unmoderated discussion. Most often it's a battle. I transcript all of that, and later that goes into a research report and into our idea tracking system, which really sounds sophisticated, doesn't it? It's just bloody Jira. Research reports are being tied back into feature planning, where we pull out the recorded ideas, and the process basically begins again. So by taking additional demographic data and by recording the experience level attendees have with XD, also by asking about team size and potential reach for XD inside their organization when these things have not been organically mentioned up front, I can map the recorded insights quantitatively. This allows us to weigh in future work against revenue impact, which obviously is one aspect in decision making because we're Adobe. Prioritized user requests and feature ideas, but also those from our own backlog, would then be designed internally, discussed with a selected group of users, or implemented as prototypes, and being discussed in our sort of private research groups first before we go into production. And the next step is to implement any validated features into the public beta and ask for feedback from the public. The inception part is we actually use XD to design XD, which can be a bit confusing. Because imagine being a designer, designing a design tool. Inside the design tool, you're designing for designers. Anyway, the whole team is working on taking and qualifying user feedback. And this is something we're taking from social media, comments to our blog posts, email, or primarily via user voice. And here's a screenshot of that showing our user voice instance. User voice is a third-party product. You can use it as well. And it's very small here, but it's more than 1,500 unique feature requests that came in those 2 years since Beta 1 in March 2016. And that is excluding the ones that we already shipped. Feature requests are being upvoted by the community, which influences directly which features will be addressed by us next. And as a team, we're asking questions. We are refining those ideas discuss details, and provide a status, completely transparent and in a dialogue with everybody. Layers are such an example. So on the XD team, we said that XD needs no layers panel. Our collective standpoint has been that you simply should not need such a complex abstraction layer to design with XD. Just think of layers in Photoshop or Illustrator and how they add friction and complexity sometimes. Take this one, for instance. I mean, are you kidding me? I'm both left-handed in Illustrator, but if you send me that file, I have no idea what to do. And such an overhead should not be required to even create the most complex stuff within XD. And many pretty complex prototypes actually showed that to us, like sort of. I've seen the visualization of an ATM, a cash machine, with more than 450 artboards built in XD without layers being available. The other question is why a cash machine should have 450 artboards, but anyhow. The people really, really wanted their layers back. I mean, look at that thing. It's 812 upvotes and 65 comments to it. That is a pretty darn clear feature request. And how people actually envisioned layers in XD in detail, well, that comes through pretty clearly with the stream of comments to that request, where users are iterating on each other's ideas. They challenge each other's concepts in such a constructive and professional way that it's actually pretty unbelievable. I mean, do you know the bottom of the internet problem? Anybody? So it's basically you ask a question on Stack Overflow, and then it's totally okay to read the first answers, but do not go any further, because you only find people that are bitching at each other. You're wrong, or no, I know it better, whatever. That's the bottom of the internet problem, not here. Again, we talk to people to find out more about the contexts they expect XD to support them with the layers functionality. And we were asking a lot of why questions, like, why do you think we should add layers? And people were like, fuck you, you're Adobe, you are layers, give me my layers back. And we were like, yeah, why? To wrap it up, XD now has layers. But by default, the layers panel is hidden, so it won't get in your way. If you really want layers, just bring it up. And we used command Y as a shortcut, because why would you want layers? And layers in XD are context sensitive. They are only showing the elements that are involved to your current work focus. It's coming in the way the users wanted that. And it's coming, or it came to XD because the users wanted it, not because Adobe thought how things should be. And it came to XD because we left our own assumptions at the door. To wrap it up, with this approach in product development, we've unlocked two major things. First, rapid validation and iteration. While we do have our own opinion, assumptions are prohibited. By leveraging user research and by getting feedback, we are able to fail early. And second, user engagement. With every release, users are telling us their most pressing issues. We are prioritizing accordingly, and we deliver a constant and relevant value add to the product by shipping monthly updates across 5 platforms. And that's it so far. We'd love to hear back from you as well, how the improved XD is feeling to you in these days. It's a free download, and since a couple of weeks, actually, the full product is free. So Not all of us are working on products that can unlock such a large user base for research. But don't worry so much about the numbers. What is important is that you are getting out of your building to your users. If you don't do that already, make it a standard behavior. And encourage your team to do that as well. Plan for that and block time for that. Budget it in. Maybe you need a little bit of money as an incentive for attendees, but build your base of power users and make sure to frequently check in with them on your latest plans and concepts. Just do it. Don't assume what your users want from you. Ask them. So, what about that bunk bed? Here's the production-ready beta I rolled out to my daughters after 3 weeks of building and pre-assembling parts. Well, the kids can't sleep on the floor just because it takes Dad more than a day to put the whole thing into place. So for the first night, when they took the product for a spin, as you can see, still some planned features were missing, but the majority of it is actually both real and solid. I've then added the less critical functionality over the next days, and that's the final thing delivered, including that nasty pull-out puzzle table. My kids loved it. And who knows, maybe they are going to become great designers later in their life. And will join a worldwide community of XD users just to enjoy finding the digital product I work on, still living and breathing the same lean principles we apply for it today. I would really love that. Thank you, Paulina, and thank you, Olga, for having me here today, and thank you for joining in.